Notre Dame's 2024 schedule is finally set, but is there a single marquee matchup on the slate? And could that prevent Notre Dame from getting into the college football playoff? That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Thursday, February 15th. I hope you enjoyed a nice Valentine's Day, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching along on YouTube, please take a moment to like the video below and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, and of course, subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, we've got a lot to get into today. Notre Dame's 2024 schedule is set. They've got the 12th game. The Irish are going to play Army at Yankee Stadium in the return of the Shamrock Series in the 11th game of the season. And I'll be honest, I don't love this matchup or the venue or really anything about it, and I'll explain why I feel that way and what impact it could have on Notre Dame's season. Plus, the men's basketball team won back-to-back conference games. Don't let them get hot. It was the first time they've done that under Micah Shrewsbury, but I'll talk about that more at the end. Let's talk about this game against Navy. It's been rumored for months. I believe that Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated was the first to report it way back during last season, honestly. He said that this was likely going to end up being Notre Dame's 12th game of the season, or 11th game of the season, 12th game total. And this really all started because Miami backed out when that was the game that was scheduled. Notre Dame is going to postpone that until 2026, and I'll talk more about that here in a second. And I feel like at this point, Notre Dame didn't really have a ton of other options, and the way that Notre Dame is sort of leaning into it is the narrative, right? It's all about the narrative. They're calling it a celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Four Horsemen backfield, and the article that made them famous, Grantland Rice immortalized Jim Crowley, Elmer Layden, Don Miller, and Harry Stuldrere in the New York Herald Tribune after the Irish upset Army 13-7 in New York way back in 1924. So this is going to be the third time Notre Dame will play in Yankee Stadium for the Shamrock Series. It'll be the fourth time overall because the Irish played the Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl way back in, I believe it was 2013. And the last time that Notre Dame played Army in Yankee Stadium was in 2010. It was Brian Kelly's first season, and Notre Dame dominated the Black Knights by a final score of 27-3. Notre Dame also beat Syracuse, who was ranked 15th at the time. If you remember, that was a pretty big game way back in 2018, at least when it started. Then the Irish dominated them. They won 36-3, and you might have forgotten by now that Tommy DeVito, the Italian-American quarterback for the New York Giants that was made famous this past season when he came in for Daniel Jones, he was actually the leading passer for the Orange in that game because Eric Dungey was their starting quarterback. He got knocked out of the game with an injury early on. DeVito comes in. He finished 14 of 31 for 105 yards and 2 picks, and I thought he was terrible. So when I found out when I was watching the Giants at one point this season, I was like, wait, isn't that the guy from that game? Yep, it was. So quite the comeback for DeVito, I guess you could say. And he was like everyone's favorite Italian this year in the Sopranos memes and all that. It was really funny. So he's come a long way. Good for Tommy DeVito. But as for this game, it does absolutely nothing for me. That seems harsh, but it just doesn't move the needle at all. Even though we knew it was coming, and it's cool that they're recognizing the 100th anniversary of the Four Horsemen. It's a big part of Notre Dame lore and the history and all that. I used to have a poster of the Four Horsemen hanging on my wall as a kid, but I feel like we probably could have honored them in a much less significant way, or maybe something during a home game this year. I don't know. I feel like we probably could have been creative in that department and found another way to do it, but I think that they're just kind of like they don't have any other options, so they're going to make it seem like this is the only reason why they're playing. But I don't know. I'm just sort of speculating about that. Other than that, there's really nothing special or unique about this game. Like, the venue has no juice when it comes to a football game. So if you're a Yankees fan, don't get mad at me. Don't start commenting how I'm an idiot. Like, it's not even the old Yankee Stadium. okay? Like, don't Yankees fans not even love the new version of the Yankee Stadium? I've been there for a Yankees game, and it's just so corporate. I was also at that game in 2018 against Syracuse, and because of the fact that it's at a baseball stadium, it's not really conducive for a football game. And I actually spent a pretty good chunk of money on the seats that I had with a few of my buddies, and they were lower level. And I was looking at it, and I was like, do I really want to pay that much? Sure, I guess I'll do it. Pretty close to the field. Guess what? It sucked because I was right behind the Notre Dame sideline, and they were all standing up, so I could barely see the action. I would much rather have been up top, maybe even in the nosebleed, so I could actually see the field throughout the game. Like, there were times when if the ball was on a certain end of the field, like, I just wasn't seeing anything. So that really wasn't that fun. The game was really never in doubt, so the crowd was never really that into it. So I don't really like the venue for this game. Notre Dame has played there a bunch of times already. And plus, Notre Dame was already going to play Navy in MetLife this season. That game was already set, so it's not like they're only tapping into the New York, New Jersey market one time. Now they're doing it twice, which seems unnecessary. To be honest, I would have rather played Army at Soldier Field, which that stadium certainly has its own issues, but at least it's different and it's in Chicago. So then you've got a game in Los Angeles, you got a game in Chicago, and you got a game in New Jersey. So you're close to New York, but instead they're doing 2 games in that area. And if you're from there, hey, good for you. You get to go to 2 neutral site games this season. But yeah, frankly, I'm just not that into it. And we got to talk about the opponent as well, obviously. Army's boring as hell. Okay, they finished 6-6 in 2023. Notre Dame already plays Navy every single year, so now they have to play the triple option twice in one season. And even though Army has been a little bit better under Jeff Monken, I believe he's 70-55 as a head coach, like this is 2 service academies in one season. If you were trying to come at me and say I don't have respect for the military, relax, dude. Relax. Okay, dad, uncle, grandpa, great-grandparents all served in the military. So we respect troops in the Wojciak family and on this podcast. So it's not about that. It's just the fact that this game, this opponent is boring, and the schedule for the Irish is pretty lackluster to begin with. Now it's even worse. And as I mentioned, this was supposed to be Miami, and it was supposed to be in South Bend. So in fairness to Notre Dame, they didn't really have a lot of time to work with here. There weren't that many opportunities either. If they had actually played Miami at home this season, I think that would have been a really fun game because, Miami is still disappointing pretty much every season, but you think they've got enough good players now that maybe eventually they'll be pretty competitive. So getting them at home would be fun, and it will be fun when they play in 2026. And I just think that Notre Dame was in a very difficult position because they had to schedule a one-off game. It's not like they're scheduling a home and home. Maybe they could have way down the road, but this was a one-off. And by now, pretty much every school already has all their non-conference games booked because for whatever reason, college programs decide to schedule games like a decade in advance. Just recently, I was like, when does Notre Dame play Alabama again? Oh, 2029? We still have 5 more years before that game. Like, it seemed like a long time ago when that was scheduled. And that game might not even happen, right? Like, who knows what college football is going to look like for 5 years from now. So it's another reason why this is so dumb. And I feel like at this point, the Shamrock Series, it's just fine, right? I actually thought when I went to Ireland last year, or when I booked that trip, I was like, oh, right, this is a Shamrock Series game. It actually wasn't. So if you look back at all the Shamrock Series games that Notre Dame has played since the first one in 2009 when they played Washington State, none of them have really moved the needle. I mean, playing at Fenway Park was cool in 2015 when Notre Dame played Boston College, but that game was terrible. Notre Dame won 19-16, and that was a really gross game. And then I will say BYU in Las Vegas was cool. It's also hilariously ironic playing BYU in the Sin City. The good thing is, though, that Notre Dame is going to travel to Lambeau Field next season to take on Wisconsin. That game was originally scheduled in 2020, but was canceled due to COVID. So that's really exciting. I wish that Notre Dame would have played Wisconsin in a home and home because selfishly I would have loved the opportunity to go to Madison, watch a game there at Camp Randall, especially seeing Notre Dame play there. And I was at the game at Soldier Field, and that was a really fun game, but I think that would have been even more fun had it been home in South Bend. So even though the Shamrock Series has been kind of disappointing for the most part up until this point, at least we have something to look forward to next season once Notre Dame takes on Wisconsin. But we have one more year to kind of suffer through it. But I admit I can complain about this game all I want. It really doesn't matter. Notre Dame didn't have a ton of options, so this is what they had to go with, and we're just going to have to accept it. All right, now let's take a look at what impact this game will have on the schedule as a whole. Could it impact Notre Dame's playoff chances? That's coming up next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, now that we've got Notre Dame's full schedule in 2024, let's run through it real quick. I'm not going to do like a full comprehensive breakdown. I'm sure I'm going to do that at a later episode, probably closer to the time the actual season starts. But let's run through it. So they open up on the road at Texas A&M. If you look on FanDuel right now, Notre Dame is actually a 1.5-point underdog in that game, but it's February, so we've got a long way to go before that could change. And I think even though Texas A&M is not necessarily what we thought they would be at this point, especially a couple years ago when they signed the #1 recruiting class in the history of college recruiting rankings. But it's still an SEC road game on the road to open the season. Kyle Field is a very iconic college football stadium, and even though I don't know if I'm in a hurry to get to College Station, I still think it's a really cool opportunity, something that Notre Dame has not been able to do a lot in their history. Texas A&M is definitely rebuilding. They're not an SEC power, but they added Mike Elko, who we know is a really good coach and one who's going to be very difficult to beat. So even though they're not like, LSU or even Oklahoma or Texas now that they're in the SEC, or Georgia or Alabama, it's still a fun game. I'm still looking forward to that game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and a cool way to open this season. Then the home opener against Northern Illinois is just another really boring home opener. Last year's home opener was really boring against Tennessee State. This is a little bit better than that, but not by much. Then Notre Dame has to go on the road against Purdue, and I have no idea why, but I just am certain that this game is going to be really annoying. It's going to be really painful. It's probably going to come down to the wire. It's going to be a weird game because whenever Notre Dame plays Purdue in September, it almost always goes wonky, especially when they play at Purdue. That game in 2008, I believe it was, when Jimmy Clausen hit Kyle Rudolph for the game winner on 4th and goal. That was crazy. And in the moment, it felt like a big win for Notre Dame, even though both teams ended up being pretty terrible that year. So that game's probably not going to be a ton of fun as a fan. Then Notre Dame returns home to play Miami of Ohio. Like, yay, Chuck Martin's coming back. Miami, Ohio was pretty good last year. If I were in college, this would probably be my favorite game of the season. It was in 2017 because a lot of my friends from high school went to Miami of Ohio and they all visited. It was really fun. But in terms of the football slate, just nothing there, right? Like, it just does nothing for Notre Dame to beat a MAC team. Then Louisville comes to town. Please, God, don't lose that game, Notre Dame. Like, I can't handle it for another year, especially at home. After what happened last year on the road in Louisville, Notre Dame got handled by the Cardinals, and I'm still dealing with that. But Louisville's going to be a good team. I know they lost some guys, but Jeff Brom is super, super aggressive in the transfer portal. He knows how to build a team quickly, and as we learned last season, he can certainly get his team up for a big game. Might be the biggest home game of the year. We'll touch on Florida State here in a second. Then Notre Dame hosts Stanford. I think Stanford will be better. I think that they are headed in the right direction, but they still just have a long way to go. They're going to try a bunch of different exotic stuff on offense, just like they did last season, but their defense is still so bad, and Notre Dame should run all over them, just like they did to close out the 2023 regular season. Then Notre Dame goes to Atlanta to face Georgia Tech. They are not playing at Georgia Tech. They're playing at Mercedes-Benz Superdome, which I think is pretty cool. Like, it's a cool stadium, and I think that adds a little unique flavor to the game, but it's still Georgia Tech, one of the worst teams in the ACC. So still, that game isn't going to be that exciting either. Then Notre Dame heads to MetLife to play Navy. The Navy game will certainly be the Navy game. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you know, you know. Then Notre Dame returns to South Bend to play Florida State. Now, this could be good. This could be a really big game. There's a chance that this could be like a top 10, top 15 matchup late in the year. You know, you've got the history with Florida State. That has the potential to be a really exciting matchup. It also has the potential to be a dud because I don't really know what to expect from Florida State. They lost a ton of dudes, most notably Jordan Travis, their starting quarterback, but they did add DJ Uiagalelei in the transfer portal. Personally, I'm nervous about DJU coming back to Notre Dame because whatever he did in that game in 2020 when he was the starting quarterback at Clemson, like that was one of the best performances I've ever seen by an opposing quarterback in that stadium. As a matter of fact, I think he set the record for the most passing yards thrown by an opposing quarterback. So even though his career didn't end up like what we thought it could be, especially in that moment in November in 2020, he's still a pretty good player. He's a big dude. He's tough to bring down, and I think he could add, or he just could be a tough matchup for the Irish at home going up against a Florida State team who was also very active in the transfer portal. Then we got Virginia at home the week after that. What's the storyline there? It's senior day. It's the Chris Tyree Bowl. It's kind of all I got on that one. Virginia is just sort of a middle-of-the-road ACC team that should be an easy win for Notre Dame. But I don't know, sometimes senior day can get tricky, even though it hasn't really been the case in recent years. Then Notre Dame heads to Yankee Stadium to face Army. We've covered that. And then they close out the regular season out here in Los Angeles against their arch rival USC Trojans. I've got no idea what to expect from USC this season. Credit to Lincoln Riley for finally, making the decision that he should have made a long time ago, and he let go of Alex Grinch, his buddy, his longtime defensive coordinator, and he has completely overhauled their defensive staff. He went to Westwood, and he poached UCLA's defensive coordinator, who's a rising star in the coaching ranks, and then he got Belk from Houston, and then he added the head coach from North Dakota State, who's a powerhouse in FCS. So they've got some good coaches on that side of the ball, but you need good players, and USC did not have any good players on their defense last season. That's part of the reason why they were so disappointing, despite the fact that they had the reigning Heisman Trophy winner as their starting quarterback. Now, as for their quarterback of the future, it looks like Lincoln Riley's going to go with Miller Moss, and it's kind of funny because he didn't want Miller Moss to be the starting quarterback when the regular season had ended, even though Moss had been around the program for 3 years by that point, and it looked like they were absolutely going to get Will Howard in the transfer portal from Kansas State, and then Moss goes out, lights out Louisville in the Holiday Bowl, and I think that drove Will Howard away because then after that, he wasn't really interested in USC. Lincoln Riley even made a comment about it after the game that Miller Moss might have scared away any potential transfers coming over. Now Will Howard's at Ohio State, and it's Miller time for the USC Trojans. I'll give him credit. He looked really good in that game, but I still think it's telling that Lincoln Riley was still wanted a transfer quarterback when the season ended, and then all of a sudden he changed course after one game. I don't know. Maybe he'll end up being really good. He looked really good in that one game, but they're a wild card. I really have no idea what to expect from USC. So in summary, Notre Dame only has 3 true road games, and Florida State and Louisville are the only teams they'll play who finished last season ranked in the top 25. I'm guessing that Florida State, Louisville, and probably Texas A&M are going to be the only teams that only ranked teams that Notre Dame plays next season. At least at the start, USC could certainly play their way into it, but they've got a tough schedule in their first year in the Big Ten. So Louisville might be the toughest game on the schedule, and that concerns me because Louisville is not a name brand. They're not at the level that it would be like a marquee game in the college football universe. And you compare that to what Notre Dame played last year, and it's not even close. Like, even though some teams like Duke ended up falling off a little bit more than we expected, same with Clemson. They weren't what the Clemson team that we thought they would be. Ohio State was still really good, and that was a huge, huge game where Notre Dame was the center of the college football world. So to me, I don't think that this Army game necessarily is going to be the reason they do or don't get into the college football playoff, but it certainly doesn't help their case because I think Notre Dame's schedule is not good enough that they can go 10-2 and feel very safe that they're getting into the college football playoff. Now, they definitely could. I'm not saying that if they go 10-2, they're eliminated from the college football playoff. I just think that they're going to need a lot of things to go their way because let's say, for the sake of argument, those 2 losses come to Florida State and Louisville and USC is their best win. Like, who knows what USC is going to be, so they really won't have a big win, and I think they're going to have a tougher argument to get into the playoff because right now, they just don't have that many opportunities to get a big win and prove to everyone that they're a really good football team. They could rack up a bunch of wins, but if all of these teams are average to below average, it's really not going to mean that much to the college football playoff committee. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I feel really good about what Notre Dame could accomplish this season, but they really can't afford to slip up in any of these games. They need to go at least 11-1 to feel like they are a lock to make the college football playoff. As soon as they lose the second game during the regular season, who knows what could happen from there. So it's a pretty weak schedule. Then again, it is February. A lot can change between now and the time that these two teams, whoever Notre Dame is squaring off against, a lot is going to change between now and then. But right now, it's not looking too great. All right, coming up next, let's talk some hoops because the Notre Dame men's basketball team did the improbable on Wednesday night. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy near you. With great deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all of the fun you're going to have. I recently used Gametime to go to a concert. I had waited probably too long to buy tickets. Then at the last second, I was like, you know what? They're cheap. Found them on Gametime, and I was there, and it was a great time. So I encourage you to use Gametime as well. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Plus, you can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, just 2 taps and you're set. Then the tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Look out. The Notre Dame men's basketball team is starting to get hot right before March. Could they be a bracket buster come March Madness? No, because this team is certainly not making the NCAA tournament. But the Notre Dame men's basketball team did win their first back-to-back ACC games under Micah Shrewsbury after they knocked off the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 58-55 on Wednesday, just a few days after they beat the Virginia Tech Hokies 74-66 at home. And even though I think we can all admit that Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech are not necessarily powerhouses in the ACC this season, it's a nice bounce back after the Irish had lost 7 straight. And this win over Georgia Tech was ugly. Like, if you've got a buddy who's a big NBA guy and constantly talks down about college basketball and the quality of play, do not let him or her watch the highlights or all of 6 of them of this Notre Dame Georgia Tech game because it was ugly, man. The Irish shot 18 of 57 from the field and won. It's crazy. They shot 31%, including 5 of 26 from 3, which is 19.2%. I actually tried to go back and find out how many teams have won a game shooting less than 20% with at least 15 threes in college basketball over the past 5 years. I couldn't find the stat, but I can't imagine there's been a whole lot of teams. The difference in this game came down to the fact that Notre Dame racked up a season-high 16 offensive rebounds compared to just 5 for the Yellow Jackets. Notre Dame scored a season-high 20 second-chance points. They also committed just 6 turnovers, which is a season low. And it's really impressive for a young team to only commit 6 turnovers, especially one when Marcus Burton is the point guard. And I love Marcus Burton. He's a really, really good player. Notre Dame absolutely has a dude in Marcus Burton, but man, he turns the ball over a lot. And it's a big reason why his assist to turnover ratio is not that great. But Notre Dame was able to keep possessions alive, and they didn't give the ball away. And when you do that, you give yourself a chance, and that's exactly why Notre Dame had a chance in this game late. Marcus Burton led the way with 18 points, but it was Tay Davis who made some key plays down the stretch. Notre Dame was up 1 with just under 2 minutes left, and then Davis got a huge steal and then a layup on the other end to put Notre Dame up 3, and then he had a nice block on the ensuing possession. Georgia Tech was able to get the ball back, cut the deficit back to 1, and then Marcus Burton missed a jumper with about 8 seconds left, but in fitting fashion, Logan Imes grabbed the 16th offensive rebound of the night for the Irish, a season high, and then Imes iced the game with 2 free throws. Notre Dame gets the win, 58-55. The win over Virginia Tech was a little bit better than this one. Georgia Tech is now 3-11 in the ACC. They're tied with Louisville for last in the ACC. Virginia Tech isn't much better. They're 13-10 overall and 5-7 in conference play, though. So it's a little bit better. But what I love most about this team, this Irish team, is that they just keep fighting, man. They're resilient. They could have easily just thrown in the towel after losing seven straight games, but they didn't. They came out. They fought hard against Virginia Tech. They fought hard against Georgia Tech, and now they're winners of back-to-back games. That's really all you can ask for out of this group. They're so young, and you can kind of see flashes, right, of the talent and the potential that this group has. I feel that way whenever I see Kerry Booth or Kebajai, like, those are two guys that Notre Dame just frankly hasn't had a ton of guys like them in the past under Mike Bray. So we're seeing flashes from them. Braden Shrewsbury is another guy. He's starting to look like the shooter that we all thought he could be when he signed with Notre Dame. He shot 4 of 6 from 3. He's the only guy really making shots against Georgia Tech. So that's all really encouraging. They've got Louisville up next. That should be a win. It will also be unwatchable. Those are two of the worst teams in college basketball. Personally, I can't wait. When I was growing up in Louisville, we used to always go to the game whenever Notre Dame played at Freedom Hall, as it was back then, now before Louisville moved over to play at the Yum Center. And back in the day, back when they were both in the Big East, those were awesome games. Freedom Hall, when Louisville basketball is going, man, that crowd is so into it. It's so electric, and it was kind of crazy going into it, rooting for the away team, but those games were always great. They almost always went into overtime. That was just a big thing between them, especially when Luke Herringody was around. So I really miss that rivalry because, in a way, it was a rivalry in basketball. So even though those teams are going to be terrible or are terrible, it's still going to be a fun game to watch for me. Then the Irish have to go on the road to Syracuse. They've got Wake Forest and Clemson at home, North Carolina and Chill, and then they close out the regular season at Virginia Tech. If they can win 2 out of the final 6, I'll take it. I think they should get Louisville. I think they'll get one other game. If they get 3, though, now we're talking, right? You kind of end the season on a high note if you go 3 of 6 plus these other 2 games. So that would be a good way to close out the regular season in Micah Shrewsbury's first year. I feel good about the future. I wouldn't say I feel definitively better about the future than I did before, because I've always been high in Micah Shrewsbury. I've always thought that he was the right hire for Notre Dame, and he is the guy to lead Notre Dame back to where they need to be in men's basketball. They still got a long way to go, though, I'll admit. This team has been really tough to watch at times this season, but you know what? When you get your wins, you got to celebrate them, and that's what we're doing here today. Really great job by the Notre Dame men's basketball team winning back-to-back ACC games. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Remember, mailbag coming your way tomorrow. Get your questions in. You can drop them below in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on X at Locked On Irish, or you can slide in the Instagram DMs at Locked On Irish Pod. You can also follow my personal X account, which is at Tyler WOJCIAK. Please subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.